welcome to CFO Principles interview series, where we explore how businesses are built. Today, we're talking to Ilan Kasan, who is the co-founder and CEO of Exceed.ai. And this company is very interesting because what they're doing is trying to streamline the sales process by using artificial intelligence to qualify, nurture, and follow up with the leads. So if you know anything about the sales departments, you know how impactful this potentially could be for sales organizations, because it oftentimes takes millions of dollars to actually operate those. And the return that you oftentimes get from your salespeople is not commensurate with the investment because they're bogged down in the very time-consuming processes of qualification, nurturing, and all that other stuff. So by taking care of that piece of the sales cycle, salespeople are actually able to position themselves into high engagement conversations and produce a higher impact into the sales cycle, and thus increasing the ROI. So that's why, to me, this is a very interesting company. And Ilan himself is a very interesting entrepreneur because his expertise is actually in building products. So I'm curious to hear his perspective on what it takes to do that. So Ilan, thank you for being here. I'm really excited to have our conversation. So I would want to begin with the history of the company. Tell me a little bit about where the company started, how it began, and why.
All right. So first of all, Exceed is a venture-backed startup. Mm-hmm. And before we started it, my founder and I, my co-founder, Yaron, who's more of a technology guy, and I'm more of a business/product person, we really wanted to do something related to artificial intelligence and see how artificial intelligence can help businesses accelerate sales. So our initial idea was to build a chatbot for e-commerce companies and retailers that can automatically take their product catalog and turn it into an engaging conversational journey to help them find the right product they want from their catalog. So with that idea was the initial idea of Exceed. And we built a kind of a working demo and a working prototype. We went out to VCs to try and raise some money. And we were able to raise $1.5 million to start executing that idea. We started hiring engineers. That's the first thing you need to do. You need to build the product, software engineers. We built an initial product, and we're starting to sell it to large consumer packaged good companies, big retailers in Europe and the United States. But the interesting thing is that after 1 year, that was in 2017, we concluded that it will be very hard to build a scalable business from that idea. And the reason was that all the people who bought our product within the company were all from the innovation departments. They weren't business owners, which meant to us that they are really testing technology. They not really own any business case. Okay, so it's all coming from innovation budgets. And you cannot build a business from somebody's innovation budget, okay? Because next year they want to try and play with a new toy. So we decided that we need to go and take the technology that we built, which is really being able to have a conversation with humans, between a machine and a human, and trying to find a different problem we can solve with that. So we went back to the drawing board at the end of 2017. And after several iterations, like many times, I found that the problem we want to solve is actually under my own if you will, my own lamp or my own light, which is really try to apply this technology for helping B2B companies or B2C companies engage and qualify leads. So we left the e-commerce space and moved into kind of more the business and lead qualification and lead follow-up. And the problem we're trying to solve is that companies invest a lot of money to generate leads. A lead today a digital lead can cost anywhere from $50 to $200. Yet they do a very bad job in following up and qualifying those leads before handing them over to humans. So we're talking about businesses where you have a lead flow, some sort of a funnel, and then you have humans who have to talk to those leads. And the most expensive resources you have is people, so you don't want to send them unqualified leads. At the same time, what's happening today is that companies are just wasting people's time to follow up, ask them questions, trying to schedule meetings, People ghost you. People get back to you and say, well, let's talk in a different date. I'm too busy right now. So we built a robot that can automate this process, and it communicates with those leads over chat on the website, over SMS. But most interestingly, we know to do it over email. And if you think of it, email still is a number one communication tool. Now, we raised money for idea A, but after 1 year, we had to come with a new idea. And that's not an easy shift to do, because you have to have that conversation with your investors to say, well, great idea that we sold you. Actually, we learned that it's a bad idea, and here's why. But if we take our technology and do some modifications, we believe we can solve a bigger problem. So we went through that journey. And to manage that transition, what we did is we built a prototype, like a demo. We went out and we spoke to 50 CMOs of tech companies in the United States, pretending we have a product to sell them, and we wanted to get their feedback. And we took this data back to our investors and said, this is what we want to do. And they said, okay, go ahead and do that. But our next challenge was that, okay, I wasted quote unquote 1 year developing the wrong product. I need more funds to go and develop the new product. So this was almost like going back and raising a new round of funding for a new idea. Mm-hmm. This time, at least they knew who we are. They knew the team. We had a baseline of technology. So I had to raise again money to build the new idea. Mm-hmm. It took us another year to build the product. This time, what we did is we identified 5 potential customers who saw merits in our idea, and together with them, we built a product to their spec. It took us 1 year until it was launched, and it was in a place where we can say, okay, I have a product in hand. So that was the end of 2018. And then 2019 is where we really started selling the product. Okay, so until then, most of our company was just engineers and product people. And by the end of 2018, we started hiring sales and marketing people. Initially, again, a small company, we hired one sales guy and one marketing guy, and we went and started to try and see how to sell it. Before I move on, any questions?
Well, I've got lots of questions, but I want to let you keep going.
Let me continue, and you stop me if I go on a ramble here. So then the next phase of the company, now that we have a product, is the fact you have 5 customers who like the product doesn't mean you have product market fit. Still doesn't mean that this product solves a real problem for a big market. So the next phase was to try and bring more customers on board and learn from and see where this product can be applied. So we started in 2018 to sell this product, and we sold it almost to anybody who said yes. Okay, this is enterprise software, so those are like $20,000, $15,000 deals, even more than that. And we sold it to anybody who said yes, I'm interested. The challenge we found is that once you start onboarding and scaling the business, you slowly start learning that, well, the product is a great product, and it involves AI and it requires automation, but it's actually not a good fit for every business. But we very quickly learned that it's not good for every use cases. It works better for larger companies with bigger volumes of leads, because then we can amplify the value proposition. And it's actually not working well when you're a very small company. Mm-hmm. So 2019 was kind of painful for us because while we saw this nice growth of customers, we also started learning that it's not a good fit for a certain type of customers. And we had to slowly see a lot of, not a lot, but we saw customers leaving us. But that's part of the learning experience. It's kind of, okay, let's sell it to whoever wants it, and let's start identifying where we have the best fit and which type of product and which type of market. So we call it the ideal customer profile. So 2019 was learning who's our ideal customer profile. It was quite painful. 2020, so end of 2019, we understood who we have to sell to, how to price it, who's our ideal customer profile. And then 2020, we started selling this product. Q1 looked very, very promising, but we all know what happened at the end of Q1 in 2020.
Yeah.
So suddenly, overnight, what happened was that the market completely froze on us. All the deals in our pipeline, everybody just, and in March, just no decision. We're not making any decision.
Mhm.
And moreover, our challenge was that we were in the middle of a round of funding.
Mhm.
And also our investors froze. And we were talking to new investors to raise another round of fund based on our success in 2019. So we had no choice, but we had to kind of hunker down a little bit. We had to reduce costs significantly, including furloughing some of our employees. The investors who we were talking to said, look, we have our own portfolio. We want to keep our money to our own company. So everybody just froze on us. So 2020 was a survival year where we experienced a near-death experience, but eventually we were able to raise money towards the end of 2020. So we found a whole new set of investors and angels who understood what we're doing, believed in our company.
Mhm.
Among those investors are some, I would say, well-known angel investors, which I cannot mention their names, and some VC firms. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to save the company and kind of kickstart the company. So towards the end of last year, we started rehiring back some of our engineers. We replaced some of our people in marketing and sales. And now we're in 2021 Q1, and we're starting to kind of accelerate the business. So that's a brief history of the company. And I'll
That's,
bring it. I'll send it back to you to ask me questions.
no, this is awesome. Thank you. So, you're in Tel Aviv now.
I'm in
Uh,
Tel Aviv.
is that where you started the company, or did you start it in the US?
Okay, so I am. Before I started the company, I lived in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley near San
Mhm.
Jose. But I came back to Tel Aviv to start the company because you have a big talent pool in Tel Aviv for engineers and a great ecosystem of investors and other professionals to help you start a company. In many regards, there's pluses and minuses in every place, but there's a lot of advantages of starting a company in Israel, especially as it relates to costs. The engineers are cheaper, but I would say as good, if not better, than other places. And there's a very good infrastructure here in terms of anywhere from accounting, VC, legal infrastructure, and accelerators and advisors and everything you need. But we're not selling in Tel Aviv. Our market is in United States. Until the corona, I used to spend over 50% of my time in the States. Obviously, that completely changed in 2020. And we work the night shift. So my sales, my marketing, we all work the night shift, and 90% of our customers are US based.
So, what was the that this is very interesting for me because from a finance perspective, running a would you consider yourself a multinational right now, where you basically have kind of the operations in both countries, right?
Yeah,
So,
so I have a subsidiary in the States and parent company in Israel.
mhm. So in that's a before the generation that we're in now, being able to execute that was actually immensely difficult, and the only companies able to do that were were larger, established companies, and now it's kind of amazing that we're able to do that with companies that are much smaller. Now, but the biggest thing that still is interesting to me is the development of the relationship process and the fundraising process, because I imagine that when you were fundraising in potentially both Tel Aviv and in the Bay Area, right? So
Correct.
when you were speaking to investors in the Bay Area, what was the general response of, hey, here's this, we're a Tel Aviv company, right?
So that's a very common model. I'm not the first Tel Aviv, I would say, Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv company. This is
Mhm.
actually a very well-known model in the high-tech world. And there are
Mhm.
many successful companies that you probably even don't know that actually have or based in Tel Aviv, or at least started in Tel Aviv and operate and look like and legally even are American companies. So
Mhm.
that model is very common. When you speak to the right VCs, there's always those VCs who, for some internal reasons, their prospectus does not allow them to invest in a company incorporated in Israel. But most of the VCs, at least in Silicon Valley, are familiar with that model.
Mm-hmm. So there wasn't an instant apprehension at all of, and in fact, so would you say that it expanded your pool of potential investors and people you go to raise funds?
Yes, absolutely, because now I have the Israeli investors.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Ilan. Ilan, can you hear me? Hello. All right. So Ilan, so being in two markets and fundraising in two markets sounds like what was a benefit for you, right?
Yes, that was a benefit because I now can tap into two different ecosystems. The local Tel Aviv-based kind of the early stage investors who understand technology and like investing in technology. And then I have the Silicon Valley-based who invest in technology, but also can also help a lot as it pertains to marketing and sales. So, and there's a pool of investors who have done that before and are familiar with that model and actually like the model and feel comfortable with that. So I see it as a huge advantage.
Great. So now let's dive in a little bit into that time in the business where you found some painful learnings, right? The first painful learning was the product type, and then
Right.
so let's dive into those a little bit more. Tell me what were some of the cues and how were you able to identify that there was an issue with the product, right? Because that to me is the sign of a pretty mature entrepreneur who's able to identify clues that most people would otherwise miss.
Right. The challenge we had there is that sales was looking good. The numbers were looking good. We were closing very big deals with very big corporations around the world. And on paper, when you look at our numbers and how fast we were able to, after half a year of developing a product from scratch, already starting to close, $50,000, $100,000 deals, it all looked really good. But the first flag for me was when I looked at who's buying and the decision-making process of how they buy.
Mm-hmm.
And people who were buying their titles was innovation. And really what they were looking at, they wanted to buy the product, they wanted to set it up, they wanted to see it work, but they never really pushed it out and made it available or commercially available within their companies. And what they were really doing is I was tapping into their budget. They had to show internally that they are innovating. They had to present that innovation to a certain business unit and then sell it internally. And when you're not selling to the business owner, it's very, very hard. It's coming from a budget, which is a temporary budget.
Yeah.
Okay. And we never talked to them about ROI. It was all about how cool the technology is. And you can't build a business by showing somebody how cool the technology is.
Mm-hmm.
And when we tried to get in front of the business owners, we understood that, or sometimes they introduced us to the business owner. We understood that they had very different priorities in terms of the business. And they did not see what, for example, a chatbot for e-commerce as a big priority for them at the time. So we could not see how we move out of the innovation department of a big retailer or a big consumer packaged good company into the business unit. So we knew that we're not going to renew the contract. We sell a subscription. So maybe they bought half a year or 6 month subscription. We knew we are not going to exit out. And we saw that pattern repeat itself. There's always exceptions to everything. There's always an exception. But when you see that the exception is when we're talking to the business unit, and even the pipeline, when I looked at the pipeline and I looked at the titles of the people who we're talking to, I understood we have a problem.
Hmm. So, what were the conversations like internally as you were making that decision, right? Because I imagine if I'm the head of your sales, which I know very little about that, but if I'm the head of your sales and you're telling me, hey, the customers that are buying from me right now, I'm spending all this time getting to them. You're telling me that they're not good customers. What was that conversation internally
It was very easy because I was doing the sales because we were still
like?
very young. We were 10 people. So it's a conversation I had with myself. I
Okay.
think the hard conversation was with the employees because you build a company, you build a vision, you kind of align everybody behind the thing. Every day you say what a great product, and we celebrate successes, and we're seeing we're closing deals and the revenues coming in.
Mhm.
But so you have to kind of suddenly say, hey guys, actually all this great stuff, it's actually not a good stuff, and here's why. It's not easy to explain to people why success is not actually success. That's one challenge. But that's the second. But the real challenge is actually coming back to our investors and having that discussion and explaining to them, yeah, all the success you saw, we actually don't believe it. It's a weird discussion, right? When you're not selling at all, it's easy. Look, we haven't sold anything, so there's a problem. But when you are selling, coming to your investors and saying, yes, we are selling, but we don't believe it's sustainable, and here's why, is a very, very tough conversation. But what's nice about our investors, especially early in, if you choose the right investors and if they're mature enough, they also understand it. So it's not that we had one conversation and said okay, but we had several conversations. It starts by planting the idea, by raising concerns, by coming back with more data, by analyzing the market. But it's not enough to say to somebody, "I don't want to do that." Right? You have to come back and say, "Okay, so what do you want to do?" So it was a process where we raised the flags, we explained why we think it's a problem. So they said, okay, how about, so what do you want to do? So we then, okay, so we understood that they're open for us to come with new ideas. We went back, we came with a few options, we analyzed them, we said which ones we like, and then we said, okay, before we do the change, before we turn the switch, let's go and validate the option that we think is the best. And
Mhm.
then we spent 2 to 3 months just validating it before we actually told everybody in the company and actually start turning. It's like a tanker, even a small company. It's maybe a small tanker, but you still have to. You can't do like a 180-degree turn. Okay, you still have to navigate the shift. And we had customers. You can't just one day pull the plug on them. So we had to continue to support the existing customers and then start developing a new product. And to be honest with you, we deleted the CRM, all the leads, everything. We walked away from all the open deals and we started from scratch.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I deleted the CRM, said it's a new market and a new product and everything. It was basically starting from scratch, but we had the technology, but we didn't have the product.
Wow. That's tough decisions. I love it. So let's move on into kind of the general strategy and the infrastructure that you've chosen to build, and kind of I'm really curious about your decision making processes along those lines. So when you began building your team, you obviously mentioned that at first you began building your technology team. But
Mhm.
how do you think about the functional units within your business? How have they evolved over time? What's going after the technology team or your R&D team? I'm not sure how you refer to them,
Okay.
but what was the next function? What was the one after that? And how do you think about in-source versus outsource in terms of
Right.
like, should I have legal as part of my in-house team or legal as part of, of a service provider?
Cool. So the first beginning of every technology startup, the most important part is the technology. So you
Mhm.
need engineers to build the product. But it's not enough just to have a group of engineers. You have to have somebody who's looking out at the market and making sure that what we're building actually is usable and meets the market requirement. And the only way to do that, really, the best way is to just have real customers who are interested in the product and are willing to spend some time to build the product with you, get early iterations with you, and give you feedback. All the rest, um, sales marketing, there's no need very, very in the first year. The founders are the marketing, and your first salespeople are the founders. So that's me and Yaron. and anything to do with finance, accounting, bookkeeping, legal, it's all external. There's no need for that. Things like, building your website, all this stuff, I was a marketer, quote unquote, and I sat with, external consultants and people that their job is to help you think through what you want to build in your marketplace, and you build an initial version, which obviously develops over time. So there's no need for the first year or so, there's no need for any, I would say, non-engineering / product functions. Now, after you start setting your first deals, okay, and starting to engage the market, I think that what you really need is a product manager, somebody to help. Because the product manager is a function that bridges the gap between the market need and the technology. And that's a super, super important function, right after the engineers. The next function that we need is, and here I think I made a mistake because I hired a sales guy, and in hindsight, I think I should have probably hired first a marketing guy, because I think that what you need to do once you have a product where you think is working, you need to start seeing if you can scale and build, scale the business. And the way to scale the business is to understand your go-to-market. And that's what I call a go-to-market fit. Like, how do you, it's not enough to, okay, so you have a product, you know that it solves a real problem, you know who it's solving it for, what type of company and who's a buyer. But the next challenge is to know, okay, so how do we now go to market? How do we know how do we reach those people? Okay, what story do we tell them? What is the buying process? Who makes a decision to buy? How many people need to be involved? And that's a complex thing to do because there's so many ways of selling a product, right? You can say, I'll give you free and then I'll upsell. You can, I don't know, you can decide to knock on people's door. You can decide to do everything online with advertisements. Just endless ways of selling a product. And eventually what I learned is that the best go-to-market is if you figure out, the best go-to-market is if you build a process that is designed to how your buyer buys. So I want people to buy from me, not how I sell. I want to sell how they buy. Okay, now it sounds easy on paper to say that, but for that you really need to understand how they buy. Okay, some type of software people want to test it before. Sometimes they send somebody junior to do the research, but there's a different decision maker. Sometimes they want to see it work in a pilot and then buy. There's just so many different models, and every product and every type of industry, and also it's also related to the price, right? If you're selling something that costs $100 a month, the credit card, somebody can just test it and just cancel it. If you're selling something that costs $100,000 a month, I think that's a whole different buying process. So just understanding this process and understanding how people buy, it's actually a very difficult thing to do because you have to start testing. You have to start engaging the market. And I think that having a marketer is probably the most important part because they can start helping us reach those people and start having those conversations. But then very soon after you have a marketing, you want a salesperson. Because the next problem is that if I can sell the product, there's something about founders that are able to sell their product more than salespeople sometimes. Why? Because we're passionate and it's ours and we know everything, how it works. And there's something about buyers that they like buying from the CEO and from the founder. It's cool because, this is the guy who built it. But it's not enough. You want to see that other people can sell your product. So that's the next thing. How can you scale it? So you want to hire a salesperson who does not understand the product as good as you, but he knows how to sell. And let's see that somebody else other than the founders can sell the product. So that's the next kind of phase after you have kind of understood how to sell it and who's the buyer and what the buying process and what type of material you need to support the sales process and everything. And then, and that's the next proof point. Can somebody else sell the product? And the third thing is obviously you need customer success, especially for enterprise software, because our product is not you take it down the shelf and you start implementing it. It requires some understanding and knowledge and thinking and fine tuning and integrations into the various other software pieces, the marketing automation and the CRM. And a lot of people don't want to deal with it. They want somebody to come and do it for them. So you need somebody in the company who's responsible for the successful implementation of the product at the customer and ensure that it's implemented properly and it's successful. So the next milestone after you have all this is, okay, after 1 year, are they renewing their contracts? Did they see enough value, and are they renewing the contract?
Great. You mentioned product manager, and I want to hone in on that role a bit because you specifically stressed that it's immensely important. And I agree with you, but I want to hear in detail, how do you view that position? What are the exact responsibilities and the deliverables of that particular position? And how do you measure the impact of such a, what otherwise what generally is known as a pretty vague position, right?
Okay, so I grew up in the product discipline, so I consider myself by trade a product manager. So it's always a subject that I really, really like. So so what's a product manager? The end of the goal, the responsibility of the product manager is to make sure that he delivers, especially in a startup, what's called the minimum viable product to the market. Okay, and what does it mean? The minimal set of features that solve the problem that the company is designed to solve, and it also does that in the best manner. The product manager is not just about identifying the problem you want to solve and the best way to solve it, but also making sure that the way the product is implemented is usable for layman, for the actual user. In our case, it's marketers, okay, who are not necessarily which they expect the product to be very, very, very simple. And the challenge, I think, or where most product managers get wrong, is that the good product managers understand that they don't understand. Okay? And they understand that they don't really know the answer, because we tend to build products based on what we think works for us and what we think is us as users. But the first realization a good product manager needs to have is that he's not the user. The first thing you need to be able to do is feel empathy with the person, with your customer, really put yourself in his shoes and look at it from their perspective, and then work with engineers to build the right product, okay, and make all the right trade-offs. The second thing is, the other assumptions you have to make is that your first version of the product is going to be wrong. You have to assume it. So now the thing is, so if you assume that it's going to be wrong, it's not really wrong, but you're not going to hit bullseye, right? You will have to probably do some course corrections and navigate until you find the right feature set and the right way to implement it. So therefore, you want to do, the less you do at the beginning, the better, because then you have the margin of error is smaller. The more you do, the margin of error will be large. And that's a mistake that most product managers do, because they think that they're measured by features, and what I call they throwing features at the problem. It's not working. We need another feature and another feature. And typically the problem is the opposite. You have too many features. So what I'm saying is you want to take all the features out until it breaks, and that's your version 1.0. And that's very, very difficult to do, by the way. It's very difficult to do because you don't really know what is this minimal set of features. And if you do that right, and what you really want to start doing is let the market will guide you in terms of what to do. But there's another challenge that comes here, that if you get the wrong customers on board, they're going to feed you with the wrong information. So that's another challenge where you need a lot of discipline to make sure that you say no to a few customers, so you can say yes to more customers. And that's very difficult, because when you're a startup, everybody says, I want a product. Your initial instinct is, yes, somebody wants a product, let's sell it. And then they start asking you for all sorts of features, which sometimes can distract you. And it happens. It even happens to us, because you don't always know when you start engaging with a customer exactly what he understood or exactly what type of requirements you will have. So you need to have a lot of discipline, a product manager, to be the gatekeeper, and he has to have the guts to say no. I believe a good product manager is the one who knows to say no, not to say yes. Right? Because no, it's a much harder thing to say no. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to feel rejection. Okay, a sales guy, a customer, right? A customer success. Somebody's going to be angry at you. Okay, so it's very, very. I think it's one of the most difficult positions. I'm not saying few, but it's very hard to do, and it takes some time to really understand how to do it right. And In startup, typically it's one of the founders who does that job. In our case, it was my co-founder, Ilan. And because you need to have a statue and you need to have a certain power in the company to be able to make those hard decisions. So that's why typically, very rarely, I believe you should hire a product manager very early.
Interesting.
I think you need one of the founders, in my opinion, it's my opinion, should be the product manager. Again, there's no rules here, right? But in many cases, if not, he'll be overridden by people more powerful than him.
So, are you, based on what you're saying about the product manager position? How would you compare that position with what a traditional startup would call the CTO, right? Or the tech department lead?
Right. Okay. So in startups who are very technical, like security or cloud infrastructure, the CTO is a product manager because they're building some technical infrastructure.
Mhm.
But in companies where there's some deep tech behind the scenes, but the user doesn't care about the technology. Okay, so we're selling like an automated rep that can automatically engage leads, qualify them, schedule meetings on your calendar. But to be honest with you, our customers don't care about AI and how the tech works and natural language processing, and they really, really don't care. For them, they want a solution to a problem.
Mhm.
Behind the scenes, there's tons of tech, very, very complex, actually. So the CTO in a company we're selling an application, the CTO is responsible to make the magic work. And the goal of the product manager is to make sure that the complexity of how this magic happens is hidden from the user.
Mhm.
And that's really the difference. In technical companies, the CTO is practically the product manager.
Interesting. So this is great. So now I understand kind of how you think about developing the team and what are some of the key roles within the organization. Now let's dive into the parts that are that I live with every day. So one of the things that for every organization that I typically work with is we have to define cost and profit centers, right, within the organization.
Mhm.
And I'm always curious how entrepreneurs begin like their mental processes initially to establish those for themselves. How do you go about and how did you go about establishing cost and profit centers and trying to figure out, okay, well, who's going to be responsible for just the cost within the organization, who's going to be responsible for the profit margins and so on? How did you think about that process?
All right. So initially, it's just engineering. That's easy. Okay.
Mhm.
We just have it's fixed headcount. It's relatively easy. There's a little bit of variable cost, but most of it is just fixed headcount, and it's easy to control and manage. Where I think it becomes a little more tricky is when you now have to start hiring marketing and sales, and then and when you are a small company, you don't have a brand presence. It's tough to bring. It's expensive to bring your first customers, especially enterprise customers. So at that point, you kind of set a budget and you say, okay, and you make some assumptions based on industry standards as to what it's going to cost us to bring a customer. And then you really start focusing on, um, we'll start, and this is where you start thinking about, okay, look, I don't really know what's my cost of acquisition. Okay. And to be honest with you, I don't really care. What I want is I need those customers in. I want to see the product is working. So you don't really care about cost of acquisition. And in some regards, you're even saying, you know what, I'm not even going to be measured by that. Of course, you can't spend whatever you want, but it's not what you're trying to track for. You track it, but it's not your main KPI. Only later on, when you can start showing you can bring this consistent flow of customers, that is when you start thinking, okay, I cannot spend X money to bring every customer, right? Because the lifetime value of the customer is, let's say, 1,000, and I'm paying 2,000 to bring the customer. It's not exactly lucrative business to be in. So now you start thinking about that. Right. So how do you scale this? And that's when you really start thinking about cost of acquisition and how we can make it more efficient and with economy of scales. You also remember initially you sell your product for cheap. Okay, you just want somebody to use it. You have to overcome the risk of working with a startup. So those things you're saying to yourself, well, you know what? I don't care initially. But very quickly you notice that when you come to raise money, those are the questions that people start asking you. Okay, well, how come your deal size is so small? High, or the cost of acquisition is so high. So again, sophisticated investors understand that, that when you come to raise an A round, they're not expecting your metrics to be, aligned to industry standards. They understand that you were really in the phase of building the product. But you have to show them that there is a path to profitability by either showing them that the deal size will grow over time and why. In our cases, we said, well, we gave them discounts. We showed them that after a while, our customers are upselling. But then you also have to show them why the cost of acquisition was so high. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, what they typically will do is they will just extrapolate based on similar type of businesses. Okay, because I can make an Excel work whatever you want. Exactly. And I will joke that all my plans and everything I do, the only thing I sit in front of my investors and I say, and even my company, and I'm not shy about it, the only thing I will guarantee about my forecast, about my plan, is that it's wrong.
Well said.
It's the only thing I'm prepared to sign off now. Now, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a plan. And of course, I'm going to try and track against the plan and see where I missed, where I did better, where I did worse. So my next plan will be more accurate.
The value of the exercise of the planning itself is the fact that it's showing the investors that you can actually go through the mental exercise of defining your unit economics, understanding how the costs are supposed to go, and seeing what the path is. But you had mentioned a very interesting component, which is defining the path of profitability. And
right.
I see this more and more common, especially with venture-backed startups, is that the path to profitability, quite frankly, is optional oftentimes. And in fact, path to profitability may be at times, especially with larger funds, be looked down upon. As in, why are you targeting profitability when you can target growth? And thus, growth skyrockets your valuation. And now the VC fund manager gets his carry. So how did you approach that conversation with investors? Did you did you specifically show them, hey, we are going to target profitability? Or did you say, you know what, here's the path. We don't intend to go towards profitability. We're going for growth. How did you go about
that? Growth, obviously growth.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, but what I do want to show them that there is a path to profitability moving forward. Mm-hmm. Okay. The way we do it in SaaS businesses, okay, in software as a service businesses, is that you look at two main metrics, gross metrics, not net metrics. One is cost of acquisition, when you take all the marketing spend, sales spend, everything, what it costs you to bring a customer. And the second thing is, what is the lifetime value of the customer, meaning that over the time of the subscription, how much money is going to bring. Now, there's one big unknown for small companies that you don't really know the lifetime value because they haven't been enough. You don't have enough runway yet. I don't know if they're going to churn after a year yet.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a 2-year startup. I'm just ramping up. So there's always this unknown of how, of retention and how the upsell pass. So that's why it's VC backed, right? That's why it's venture capital, and there's a leap of faith, and there is some. But look, there's always leading indicators and signs you're seeing in the business that indicate that yes, there is a path to profitability. And you say, yeah, sure. And you always have customers who will churn, right? Maybe they were the wrong customers. Maybe the product wasn't mature. So those things happen when you're a small company and you don't have also enough volume to really say, I have a trend here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when the way the VCs look at it, they've seen so many similar companies. I think a lot of them developed instincts. I don't know if you read the book Blink, right? They kind of know. They've seen something similar before, and they look at the company and say, sure, I know they're not profitable now, but I'm seeing very good indicators that I have seen in another 2, 3, 4, 5 startups. Mm-hmm. Okay? And to be honest with you, if the VC doesn't believe you, it's okay. Everybody has their own emotional, because it's a leap of faith. When you take a leap of faith, a little bit of belief you have to put here. And different people have different experiences. And that's why, it's venture capital. And that's why not every VC you meet says, sure, here's a check. Okay. Some take the leap of faith. Why? Because they feel comfortable with you, with the business, and they've seen something similar and they can see how it can work for them. And some don't. And that's fine. That's part of the business I am. So what I try and focus is on, where things are working and show them that can be scaled and how I think it can be scaled and why right now it's hard to scale. Let's see if I can give an example. Even simple things like all our billing and automation of the billing and stuff like that. It's not something I even care about at this point. Okay, I don't really care about. Only recently we started implementing some of those stuff. For example, onboarding of the customer. I said to my I don't care. I'll put people and we'll help them onboard them until they're successful. And later on, we'll figure out how we make the product easier to use, so we don't have to spend so many people to onboard them. Okay? So it's a trade-off. It's a temporary trade-off we have made. So right now, if I look at how much resources I have to put to make a customer successful, it's not scalable. But I know that if I fix stuff in the product over time, we can reduce this cost. Okay, and we've already started doing it. So I'm saying, look, it used to take us X time to onboard. It now takes us, I don't know, half of it, and I believe we can do another half. So that's what I try and do. I try and show them that I made those trade-offs consciously. I know what needs to be done in the future, and explain to them why right now I don't think it's a priority.
Interesting. So that's back to this one. It takes a lot of it to say no, right? So we're near towards the end here, but I want to make sure that we spend a little bit of time talking about the future. So, you've gone through this 2020, which is a remarkable year for a lot of entrepreneurs, and you've gone through that freeze out a little bit. What do you see, and how do you view the economics in the world, and how do you think those economics are going to affect Exceed.ai?
Okay. So if I step up the 50,000 feet view of what we're doing, we are moving to what I call an augmented workforce, where you're going to see robots and automation playing a bigger part in how we work. And when I say augmented, meaning I don't mean the robots are going to replace people, but actually robots are going to work alongside humans to make them more successful. And you're slowly going to see it in more and more functions in the workplace, where you want the robots to automate manual repetitive tasks that humans are bad at doing and hate doing, and enable them to focus on things that only humans can do. In the sales and marketing space, what we are automating is things like, follow-up, persistent, contact me later, meeting scheduling, answering mundane questions, things which you think of it, there's no reason why a human has to do. And we want to free up humans' time to do what humans like doing best, which is talking to customers, understanding empathy, understanding nuance and complexity. Those are things robots don't know how to do. And it's hard to teach them how to do it. I don't know, maybe in 100 years, but right now it's very hard to, teach them to do that. So that's a mega trend which I want to tap into, where you're going to see more and more automation coming in. The robots are coming not to replace, but to help. And I believe that we are in the beginning of this journey in the workplace. You're starting to see a lot of the automation, what's called robotic process automation, coming in for a lot of back office type of tasks, which are not AI based. They're really teaching robots to just do repetitive stuff. And what you're starting to see now is AI based automation, which requires some sort of a decision making or some sort of a sophisticated understanding of data. In our cases, understanding what customers are asking or what they're saying, in order to make a decision and automate it. And our product is not perfect, right? When we don't know what to do, we actually escalate it to a human. The human either approves or corrects us. And it's a continuous loop where we continue to learn. And what we actually do, we're collecting millions of data points, and we continue to enhance our engine with all those data points, and it's becoming smarter and smarter. So we have a huge advantage right now in the market because we have what I call a data network effect. The more customers I have, the more data I have. The more data I have, I can make the product better. And I believe that we are in the infancy of that process in the workplace. And for Exceed, I want to be the leader in the sales and marketing space for the augmented workforce. You're going to have AI and assistance and automation helping you scale your sales and marketing funnel.
How do you view the evolution of your product and the requirements and the pivots that you need to make both small and big in order to achieve that, right? Because talking about it is one thing, right? You already are in a pretty well in a good position to take advantage of that, but there's a big road ahead. What do you see in your product? And how do you intend to evolve it to accomplish that?
Right. So what we have learned is that in every vertical, there's things are a little different, right? The lexicon and the type of interactions are very different. So the way to win here is to stay very focused on a certain vertical, collect as much information about this vertical, and kind of build the perfect solution in that vertical, and then slowly move on to different verticals. That's one kind of expansion. The other expansion is, right now we know to automate like 15 to 20 type of common interactions. But the real world is much more complex than that, and there's many more type of interactions we need to start automating, and also a lot of nuanced type of interactions. So we're starting to expand also in the depths in each one of them, the type of things we are able to automate. And it's really driven by collecting data. Data is king, right? The more data you have, the data feeds the algorithm, the AI, because it's all machine learning, it's deep learning. And the more customers I have, the more data I have. So that's kind of the virtual cycle we have here. So I think that the key for us to succeed is really stay focused on the verticals we're going after, collecting as much information and making it perfect, because I think people are still scared of AI. And the fact that some robot will come and do stuff for you is still a scary factor for many, many people. So building that confidence and those initial successes is super important for us to make this like a common product that everybody will have. So right now, I'm not, really what we're focusing is making every customer successful, making sure we take all the learnings we can and continuously improving the engine. And that's where, I'm not trying to go expand to verticals or not even try to expand use cases, because you can take our technology and apply it to customer success and customer support and HR use cases and employee engagement use cases. Just so many things you can do. And we decided to focus on specifically the middle of the funnel of, in sales and marketing. That's where we focus right now.
All right, last question. As you look out ahead, for me personally, there are things that excite me and there are things that scare me about the future.
Yeah.
What are those things for you?
So what excites me is what scares me typically, to be honest with you. Because they're the challenges, right? It's things that scare you. So I think there's always the risk in our industry that, there's always a new startup who might come with something. There's a saying that the second mouse gets the cheese. In fact, I'm the second mouse in our case, but maybe there's a new trap, and maybe the third mouse is going to get the cheese. Mm-hmm. So there's sometimes an advantage to the second or third or even fourth movers, because you stood on their minds and they can come and learn from you. So I'm always scared of new competition. And then in the world we live in, I'm always scared of the big players, like the Salesforce.com. You have almost unlimited resources. And if they see what we're doing and they like it, they can probably outspend me. Mm-hmm. But being a startup, I can move fast. I have the first mover advantage. I took the risk. And typically my hope is that, one, if they do notice that there is an opportunity here, it's actually a good sign. It means that I'm onto something. And then I see it as an opportunity because, I might be in a place where it'd be very hard for them to catch up, especially because I have this, what I call a data network effect, which creates a very big barrier of entry for a new player. So At the end of the day, competition, especially from the big tech, is what I'm most scared of.
Great. Well, Ilan, I want to thank you very much for your time. This was amazing hearing how you think and hearing how you go through your decision making processes has been very invaluable. So thank you very much, and wish you the best of luck with Exceed. And I know you're headed to bed pretty soon here because it's pretty late. So we'll talk soon. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and thank you for having me.